I was once a psychiatrist, but what killed my son wasn't in any textbook I ever read. 10 years later, my grandson stood in a poor neighborhood handing out medicine at the very place I once called my clinic, and I left him a gift with a note that read, "I'm still alive." If you think this is just another family story, you're dead wrong. Subscribe now so you don't miss what's coming next. The clock on the wall ticks like a whisper inside the stillness. It's 6:07 a.m. in San Francisco, and the light leaking through the blinds is gray and reluctant. Outside, the city stirs, cars hum. Someone yells at their dog. A siren winds down in the distance. But in here in this box, painted an odd, patient green, time is soft, slower, older. Agnes Mitchell sits at her kitchen table stirring her tea for the 4th time without sipping. She doesn't look at the cup. Her eyes stay on the photo in front of her, half wrapped in a faded dish towel. A black and white family portrait yellowed at the edges. A man in his 30s with a tired smile and soft eyes. Michael, her son. She brushes her fingers across his face, not with affection, not yet, with caution, like he might vanish if she touches him too long. Then she flips the frame face down, quietly, like an instinct. The radio plays in the background. Some public health broadcast, a female voice talking about post-COVID behavioral care for the unhoused. Agnes isn't really listening, but she doesn't turn it off either. The sound gives her something to drift away from. She takes her breakfast to the sink, half a boiled egg, untouched toast. The tea is still hot, still ignored. Her steps echo in the little green kitchen. Everything in here is green. The cabinets, the trim, the chairs. Not a bright, lively green, no. A dull hospital kind of green. The color of waiting rooms and nerves. She chose it long ago, back when her mind was clinical and exact. It used to calm her. These days it just feels like a memory that forgot to fade. She opens the back door, bends down to water a potted cactus she doesn't really care about. The tiny watering can hisses in the soil. She wipes her hand on her robe and pauses. A sound. The mailbox creaks. Agnes walks slowly to the front, opens the slot. There's only one thing inside. It's a small envelope, off-white, the kind kids use in elementary school to pass notes. No return address. Her name is written in big, wobbly letters, Dr. Mitchell. Her hands stiffen. No one's called her that in 10 years. She shuts the door, clicks the deadbolt, and walks back to the kitchen. No urgency, like handling a fragile bone. She sits, opens the envelope with a butter knife. Inside is a single creased photograph, color, recent. A young boy, maybe 12 or 13, standing in front of an old brick building with peeling paint and a sun-faded sign that reads, Community Health Center. But Agnes knows what that building used to say. Her name was on that sign once. She stares at the boy's face, something in his mouth, the stubbornness, that chin. A blood memory pulses behind her ribs. And then the note, handwritten crooked like someone learning how to write not long ago. I want to be like you. That's it. No dear grandma, no signature, no other message. Agnes presses her thumb to the paper hard, as if testing for forgery. But the pen ink smears beneath her thumb, real, fresh. She leans back in the chair, breathes in slow. Something trembles in her lips but doesn't surface. Her eyes don't water. They haven't in years. But the pressure is there. It lingers in the space between her chest and throat like fog that refuses to rise. She looks at the photograph again, then again. The boy's smile is crooked, almost reluctant, almost like. She gets up, walks into the narrow hallway, past the dusty bookshelf filled with medical journals she no longer understands, past the closed door on the right, the one she never opens. At the end of the hall is a mirror. She stands in front of it. Her reflection is a stranger she tolerates. The woman in the mirror wears Agnes's robe. Her white hair is pulled into a bun too tight for comfort. Her mouth is downturned even in rest. Her eyes are not kind, not anymore, but sharp, searching, as if forever scanning for guilt in others. She stares at herself. The envelope still trembles in her hand. Then without a word she steps away, heads to the closet, pulls out an old coat, heavy wool charcoal gray. She hasn't worn it in nearly a year. She dresses slowly, deliberately, as if layering herself in armor, sensible shoes, a scarf she doesn't remember keeping, purse over her shoulder. She walks into the bathroom, checks for lipstick, doesn't apply any, just breathes. By the time she steps out the door, the city's light has sharpened into a crisp morning blue. Agnes locks the door behind her, turns, walks. The mailbox creaks shut again in the silence. The bus arrives 3 minutes late. Agnes stands at the stop with her hands inside her coat pockets. There are 2 others waiting, a teenager in earbuds and an old man coughing into a handkerchief, but she doesn't look at them. Her eyes are fixed on something they cannot see, a place far ahead or far behind. The bus sighs open. She steps on, drops exact change into the box, doesn't say a word. The driver doesn't ask where she's going. No one ever does anymore. She takes a seat in the back near the window. The sun is creeping up now, painting long shadows across the street. The route winds past laundromats, corner stores, schools with peeling murals. As the city unfolds, Agnes keeps the envelope on her lap. Occasionally her fingers press into it like checking the beat of a pulse. Something inside her is waking up, but not gently. They pass the old fire station. A sudden jolt, not in the road but in her body. Muscle memory. She used to bring Michael there when he was small. He loved the shiny red trucks. She hated the noise. They pass the street where Michael's apartment used to be. She closes her eyes. 10 years. She hasn't spoken to Julia since the funeral. Didn't even tell her to stay away. She just vanished. Shut the door. Turned the lock. Told the world it was too late for conversation. But now this letter, this boy. Could it be Noah? She does the math again, over and over. Noah was 3 when Michael died. 11 when Julia sent the last card. 12 now. She never responded. She burned that card in the sink. Still remembers the sound of it folding in on itself like soft paper lungs collapsing. But this is different. He reached out. Not Julia. Not some social worker. The boy. I want to be like you. Like her. She wants to laugh or scream or tear the note in half. But instead she reaches into her purse, pulls out her old ID, faded creased. Dr. Agnes Mitchell, MD Psychiatry. She slides her thumb across her photo. A younger woman, still sharp-eyed but less brittle. This boy has no idea who she really is, what she's done, what she's undone. What kind of doctor refuses to treat her own daughter-in-law's grief? What kind of mother turns a funeral into a courtroom and acts like the only victim? What kind of grandmother disappears? The bus jerks to a stop. She almost drops the envelope. This is the corner, the one with the mural, the little community garden, the entrance to the alley behind the health center. She stands, walks off the bus without a word, and then for the first time in over a decade she sees it. The building. The bricks are chipped. The door has been replaced. The windows have bars now. But it's still hers, not by ownership, not legally, but spiritually. That space, it remembers her. And now so does someone else. She stands across the street clutching the photo, and then she sees him. The boy, Noah. He's sweeping the front steps, wearing a blue volunteer vest, smiling at an old man in a wheelchair as he hands over a plastic bag of meds. It hits her like cold water. That smile, it's Michael's. The exact same curve of the lips, the same slight dimple on the left side. She almost steps into the street, but she doesn't. She turns away, stares at her feet. When she looks up again, Noah is gone, inside. Agnes breathes. Then, without knowing why, she whispers under her breath, "He really does look like you." And for just a moment, something in her face softens. Not enough to forgive, not yet, but just enough to remember. The photo is still in her hand. She folds it, carefully, places it back in her purse, and walks away. But this time with purpose, like she's not running from something, but toward it. The street smells like wet cement, old engine grease, and something faintly sour like vinegar soaked into concrete. This part of San Francisco doesn't exist on postcards. Agnes knows. She used to drive past it, never through it. She steps off the Muni bus with a stiffness that's no longer just age. It's the weight of return. The sidewalk is cracked. Rusted chain-link fences tremble in the wind. But the building's still there. What used to be Mitchell Family Psychiatry, now a weather-worn sign, reads Community Health and Hope Center. She crosses the street slowly, her coat buttoned to the neck even though the fog has burned off. Her cane taps the sidewalk every third step. She's not frail, not quite, but she moves like someone negotiating a truce with the earth. At the corner, she finds it a stone bench half hidden by overgrown ivy. It's across the street from the clinic, set back far enough to watch without being seen. Agnes sits. She doesn't look at the building right away. Her eyes drift past it, scanning the street like she's pretending to wait for someone, but in truth she's waiting for something else. For him. Minutes pass. The wind rises, blows old newspapers across the sidewalk. Then the door opens. Out comes a boy. Not just a boy, the boy. Noah. He's taller than she expected. Not gangly sturdy, like he's already carrying things heavier than his age. A canvas volunteer vest hangs on his shoulders, and beneath it a white t-shirt a bit too clean for this part of town. On the back of his vest, someone's written "Med Dispense" in Sharpie. He's got a red crate in one hand, pill bottles clink softly inside, and a clipboard in the other. Agnes leans forward involuntarily. Her grip tightens on her purse. He walks toward the small line forming at the bottom of the ramp. 3 unhoused men. One woman with a stained sleeping bag over her shoulders, and a young man clutching a skateboard with duct-taped wheels. Noah kneels down beside the older man in front. "Mr. Lenny," he says, clear, confident. "I've got your beta blockers. Same dosage, just a new brand." His voice cuts through the air like a needle through gauze. Agnes's breath hitches. That voice, there's no denying it. He doesn't sound like Michael. He feels like him. The way he slows his words, the precision in tone. He isn't just repeating instructions, he's connecting. Michael used to speak to patients the same way, like their pain was holy and deserved translation. Noah hands over the bottle with both hands. The old man's fingers shake. Noah steadies them without comment. Next is the woman. "No interactions with your antibiotics. But don't skip meals," he says softer now. "Even if it's just soup." She nods, eyes down, mutters thank you. Agnes feels the hairs on her arm rise. It's like watching Michael's spirit inhabit someone else's skin. Her grandson. She hadn't even let herself say the word in her mind. Not since the funeral. Not since Julia clutched that boy in her arms at the cemetery, asking Agnes to hold him, and Agnes walked away instead. Now here he is, alive, growing, becoming, and he doesn't know she's 50 feet away. Agnes's hands tremble. She folds them into her lap. From the clinic door, another figure appears. A woman, medium height, clipped steps, gray cardigan sleeves pushed up, hair pulled into a knot, professional but hurried. Julia. Even at this distance, Agnes knows the shape of her. Julia calls something toward Noah. He nods and heads back up the ramp, empty crate in hand. She waits for him at the top. Their exchange is brief, nothing dramatic. But the comfort between them is visible. They've made a life without her. Agnes shifts back against the bench, recoiling. Her eyes fall to a patch of grass below her feet. It's yellowing from the drought. A single white flower tries to bloom through a soda can tab. She stares at it like it's a sign, but it gives her nothing. Across the street, the line shrinks. A few people wander off with bags of medication. Noah disappears into the building. But then he returns. This time with a clipboard, a pen, and a box of bandages. He's chatting with another boy around his age, maybe a volunteer or friend. They laugh. A quick elbow to the ribs. A flash of playfulness, and just like that, Michael's smile flickers again. Agnes's throat closes. She can't take her eyes off him. Every instinct maternal medical human wants to rise up and walk to him, but she doesn't. She can't. Instead, she slips deeper into the shadow of the tree that half covers the bench. Invisible. Then he glances across the street, right at her. Agnes flinches. The movement is so slight, so sudden, that she nearly tips her purse off her lap. She steadies it, breath held. Noah squints, just for a second. Their eyes don't meet, not fully. But something primal passes through him. He frowns, tilts his head, the way a dog does when it senses a frequency humans can't hear. And then he turns away. Agnes exhales. Not relief, something messier, shame maybe. She waits until he disappears inside again. Then she rises from the bench. Her knees ache. Her spine protests. But she doesn't stop. She walks fast, faster than she should, slipping behind a delivery van ducking around the corner. She doesn't look back. She doesn't see the clinic door swing open again, doesn't see Noah step out looking across the street, searching. She's already gone. 2 blocks later, Agnes leans against a lamppost. Her chest heaves. Not from the walk, from everything else. She opens her purse and pulls out the photo again. Noah in front of the clinic, smiling. The letter folded beside it, the ink already smudging at the edges. I want to be like you. The cruelty of it pierces her. Like her. What does he even know? What did Julia tell him? Does he know she abandoned them? Does he know she refused to come to the hospital that night? That when the nurse called said Michael was in surgery, her first question was Julia driving? That when the coroner called to confirm the death, she said was the child in the car? That when the grief counselor called Agnes hung up, she hadn't just lost her son. She'd lost the only future she ever imagined having. Now he's here. Not just surviving, thriving. With Julia. With strangers. With a building that used to be hers. No, she thinks, not anymore. This is his now. His and hers. She folds the letter again, this time more carefully. Places it back in her purse. Wipes her eyes, but there's nothing there. No tears. Just the ghost of one. Then she hears it. A small laugh. A child, not Noah, from inside a nearby taqueria. Biting into something messy. The joy in that sound, unburdened whole, feels like a wound in her. She looks up. The clinic is still in view 2 blocks behind her. The green paint on its shutters is chipped, but it's still the same green. Like her apartment, like her past. Her whole life used to be that color. She thought it meant peace, authority, logic. But now it just looks like denial. Agnes turns away again. This time slower. Not running. Just tired. As she disappears down the next block, a breeze kicks up. From across the street, Noah stands on the edge of the clinic ramp, clipboard tucked under his arm. His eyes scan the area. He doesn't know what he's looking for, but he's sure someone was watching him. He narrows his eyes at the empty bench, then smiles. Just a little, as if whatever it was, whoever it was, might still be close. Watching. Protecting. The door creaks like it hasn't been touched in years, because it hasn't. Agnes steps into the room that used to belong to Michael. She doesn't turn on the light. Doesn't need to. The green curtains filter the late afternoon sun into something almost underwater. The air is still stale, yet thick with something alive. Memory, maybe. Or denial. Everything is where it always was. A blue jacket draped over the back of a chair. His medical textbook stacked on the desk. A coffee mug half faded with the words, "World's okayest doctor," sits by a dead fountain pen. There's a thin layer of dust on the windowsill, and the air smells faintly of old paper and cedar wood. Agnes closes the door behind her. Each step she takes is silent, measured, like she's afraid to wake the past. She stands in the center of the room and just breathes. Then her eyes find the bed. The blanket is still tucked under the corners the way he used to do it military style. Agnes never changed it. Not once. The indentation on the pillow is long gone, but in her mind it's still there. She sits on the edge. The springs let out a sigh. She leans forward, elbows on her knees, and stares at the floorboards. Nothing moves. Then quietly, ruthlessly, her mind drags her back. 10 years ago, the phone on the kitchen wall was ringing. Agnes picked it up on the 3rd ring. She never let it go to voicemail. Not when it was Michael. His voice was raw, exhausted. "Hey, Mom, you sound like hell," she said. "I've been on call since Friday. That's 3 days straight." "Yeah." Pause. Agnes tightened her grip on the phone. "I told you this job would burn you out." Michael laughed under his breath. "You told me a lot of things." "Like what?" "Like to never marry Julia." Her stomach knotted. "I said she wouldn't understand the pressure. She understands more than you think. She's a child. She's a better parent than you ever were." Agnes went quiet. So did he. She shifted the phone to her other ear. "Michael, come home." "I am home. I mean here. With me. You're wasting away out there." "I'm not a boy anymore, Mom. You're still my son, and you still treat me like a project." Agnes said nothing, her jaw clenched tight. Michael sighed. I need rest. I'm going to sleep." She didn't want to let him go. "Michael." "What?" "Promise me you'll come by this weekend. Just you. No Julia. No baby." There was a pause. It stretched. It strained. Then came the answer. "Good night, Mom." Click. The tone buzzed in her ear like a wound. Back in the present, Agnes winces at the memory. Her fingers curl into her lap, nails digging into her palms. She opens her eyes, staring at the far wall, and sees it. His old diploma. UC Berkeley. Pre-Med. Summa cum laude. She used to brag about it to strangers at grocery stores. Back then, he was still her Michael. Before Julia. Before the baby. Before everything slipped sideways. The air in the room thickens. Then comes the second memory, not a flashback now, but a dream. The one that's haunted her for a decade. She's in the passenger seat of a car, but she can't see the driver. The windshield is cracked, and there's rain, but it's falling upward. A siren echoes faintly. Headlights spin, and then a sudden impact. Glass everywhere. She turns her head. Michael's face is beside her, eyes open, lips parted, unmoving. The horn blares endlessly. She wakes gasping, not in the dream, but in the memory of the dream. She's still in the room, still sitting on his bed. The light has shifted. The green is darker now. The sun's beginning to set. She rubs her face. Her hands tremble. Then she stands, walks to his desk, opens the top drawer. Inside are old pens, a notebook, and one envelope, yellowed, bent at the corners, addressed to her, in Julia's handwriting. Agnes doesn't touch it for a long time, just stares, like it might catch fire on its own if she waits long enough. Then slowly she picks it up, slides a nail under the flap, but stops. She never read it. She doesn't want to. She walks to the bathroom, pulls out a small porcelain dish once used for cotton balls, lights a match. The flame flickers. She holds it to the corner of the envelope. It catches. She drops it into the dish. The paper curls, darkens, shrinks in on itself like a body folding in grief. The smoke smells sharp, sharp and final. When the last scrap turns to ash, she exhales. There's no relief, only silence. She walks back to Michael's bed, sits again. The room is almost dark now. She whispers it low and venomous. They took him from me. Her voice cracks, but it doesn't break. She grips the edge of the mattress with both hands. Brought him into that chaos, that child, that woman. The word woman tastes like rust in her mouth. She let him work himself to death. She encouraged it. Agnes stops, a tremor in her throat. Her body rocks forward slightly, not sobbing, not shaking, just hollow. She presses her forehead to her hand. Her breath shudders. The silence is brutal. Then a memory surfaces, uninvited. Michael, age 9, crying on the first day of school. Agnes had knelt beside him, her white coat still on. She was late for rounds. Don't cry, she said. Only the weak cry. He stopped, not because he wasn't scared, because he wanted her to be proud. The past doesn't just haunt, it accuses. Agnes rises again, slower this time. Her knees protest. She walks to the window and opens it slightly. Cold air rushes in. Below, a dog barks. A car alarm whoops once, then dies. Life indifferent and steady. She looks up at the ceiling. If you're up there, she mutters, you should have taken her instead. She closes the window. The green light returns. Everything in this room is still his, but none of it brings him back, and none of it ever will. Agnes turns out the light, walks back into the hallway, leaves the door open for the first time in 10 years. Agnes started showing up again the next morning. Same bench, same coat, same silence. She carried a small notepad, now leather-bound black with a broken spine. It used to hold case notes, therapy prompts, clinical observations. Now it held only one subject, Noah. At 7:52 a.m. she recorded. Subject arrives on foot, carries small backpack, greets security by name, smiles. At 8:17 a.m. engages with elderly male client, laughs once, left hand on shoulder, patient relaxed. At 9:04 a.m. organizing vitamin bins, precision consistent with trained assistant. No wasted movement. Observed correcting another volunteer without condescension. Each entry was neat, measured, cold even, but her hands trembled when she wrote. Agnes wasn't watching like a grandmother. She was watching like a doctor building a file. The days repeated. She brought a thermos, now coffee she never drank, and stayed for hours. At noon she left, always before Noah's lunch break. She didn't want to see him sitting with Julia, that part she couldn't study, couldn't name, couldn't bear. By the 4th day, she knew every window, every crack in the clinic's paint, every rhythm of the schedule. The delivery van always came at 10:30. The side door was never properly latched afterward. She filed that away. Noted. Planned. That night she returned. The clinic sat dark and quiet under a low marine fog, like a ghost ship docked in a forgotten harbor. Streetlights flickered above her. The only sounds were the wind rustling plastic wrappers down the alley and the far-off bark of a hungry dog. Agnes stood across the street for a full 5 minutes, watching, breathing. Then she crossed. The back gate groaned open. The latch had rusted through. The motion light failed to blink on. Good. She didn't knock. She reached for the side door and it gave a soft click. It opened a few inches, just like she expected. Agnes stepped inside. The hallway smelled different now, fresh paint, lemon cleaner, human need. But the bones were the same. She knew this place like the inside of a chest cavity. She moved slowly, her footsteps muffled by the rubber soles she had carefully chosen. Her eyes scanned the walls. Some of the old posters remained signs about mental health. How to recognize burnout. A sun-faded pamphlet with her own quote on it. Healing isn't rescue, it's recognition. She scoffed under her breath. How many times had she said that like it meant something? She passed the break room, now filled with vending machines and mismatched mugs. She turned left at the old exam rooms. Her old office was at the end. The plaque was still there. Dr. A. Mitchell, M.D., Psychiatry. The letters were scratched but intact. No one had removed it. She stared at the brass like it was an artifact in a museum that used to be her home. She reached out, touched the cool metal with her fingertips, then pushed the door open. Darkness swallowed her. She stood in it. The air was still and somehow warmer than she remembered. The overhead light had been replaced with a softer fixture, probably energy-saving, but the layout was unchanged. Desk in the corner, filing cabinet against the left wall, small couch under the window. The green blinds, her blinds remained. She stepped in, closed the door behind her. For a second she couldn't move. Then she walked to the desk. The chair let out a low groan as she lowered herself into it. She opened the drawers, one by one, slow. Top drawer, pens, Tylenol, a bottle of hand sanitizer dated 3 years ago. Second drawer, loose leaflets, unopened envelopes, a sticky note with Ask Julia redosage protocol scrawled in ballpoint. Bottom drawer locked. She stared at the keyhole. She remembered the spare key, in the pot behind the aloe plant. She stood, turned, moved the pot. There it was, still taped under the rim, wrapped in a piece of gauze. Her fingers shook as she peeled it free. Back to the drawer, inserted, turned. The lock clicked. Inside was a small wooden box. Cedar. Hinged. She recognized it instantly. It used to sit on her home desk. Michael had built it for her in high school, said it was for important thoughts. She hadn't seen it in over a decade. She lifted the lid. Inside, an old digital voice recorder. Silver, scuffed, TDK logo half peeled. She hadn't used it since before the accident. Her breath caught. There was a note under the recorder, folded twice. She opened it. Save this for him, in case he ever asked. Jay. Her heart clenched. She pressed play. Static. Then Michael's voice, tired, gentle, smiling through it. Noah, if you're hearing this, it means your mom gave it to you, which means you asked. And if you asked, it means you want to know where you come from, who you come from. Agnes's hand flew to her mouth. Your grandma was... She's complicated, brilliant, unforgiving. She believed in helping people more than she believed in herself. That's how I learned to do this work. Not from med school, from her. From the way she sat in silence and let people break open. A pause. Agnes closed her eyes. She'll never tell you this, but she was the reason I didn't fall apart after my first failed diagnosis. She was the one who taught me that healing isn't fixing, it's staying. That sometimes the only thing you can give someone is your presence. Her fingers gripped the recorder tighter. You don't have to be her or me, but if you find yourself wanting to help people, really help them, I hope you do it the way she did. Agnes couldn't breathe. Then came the last line. Noah, you're going to become someone who listens. Just like her. Just like me. You're going to be a healer. I know it. I see it already. The tape clicked to a stop. Agnes sat there, frozen. Then her hand lifted slowly, as if it didn't belong to her, and she brought the recorder to her chest. Held it there, pressed it against her sternum like it might restart something long dead. She didn't cry, not loudly. Just 2 silent tears that slid down her cheeks and disappeared into the collar of her coat. Her shoulders didn't shake. Her mouth didn't twist. She made no sound at all. It was a grief too old for sobbing, a grief that had calcified into something harder. She stayed that way for a long time. In the chair, in the dark, a woman gripping a dead man's voice inside a room the world had already moved on from. Outside, the wind picked up. A loose flyer fluttered off the bulletin board in the hallway and skittered across the tile like a ghost escaping a locked ward. Inside, Agnes sat still, and for the first time in 10 years, the green walls felt less like memory and more like forgiveness. Agnes stepped out of the clinic the same way she came in, quietly through the side door, like someone sneaking out of a past they hadn't finished grieving. The street was dark now. San Francisco fog had started to roll back and curling around street lamps and softening the corners of everything. A thin mist clung to her coat. The silence was thick, the kind that waits before it accuses. Then, "How long have you been watching us?" The voice stopped her cold. Agnes froze, hand still on the edge of the door frame. She didn't need to turn to know who it was. She turned anyway. Julia stood just beyond the gate of the clinic, arms crossed, framed in the yellow wash of a flickering street lamp. Her face was calm, but her stance was sharp, every inch of her braced for the fight she never wanted to have. Agnes said nothing. She stepped down onto the sidewalk, slow and steady, like every movement needed to be earned. Julia took a half step forward. "How long, Agnes?" Her voice cracked slightly at the edges, just barely, like it had rusted from disuse. Agnes didn't blink long enough. Julia let out a short laugh, dry, bitter. "Jesus, I had a right to see him." "A right?" Julia's voice sharpened. "You gave up every right when you ghosted your own grandson for 10 years. When you walked away from us like we were disposable. I walked away," Agnes said, her voice suddenly colder, "because you let him die." The words hung between them like broken glass. Julia flinched. Agnes didn't. There it was, the unspoken finally spoken. Julia's mouth opened, closed. She looked at Agnes like she was seeing a stranger in a familiar skin. "You really believe that?" she said flatly. Agnes's jaw tightened. He was drowning in that job, in that house, in that she caught herself but not fast enough life you built. He was trying to provide for us. No, he was trying to escape. He loved me. He loved Noah. Agnes's eyes flashed. "He called me the night before. Sounded like he was barely breathing. And you just let him keep going." Julia stared at her, and then she said, almost too quiet, "He wasn't trying to escape us. He was trying to survive you." That landed. Agnes looked away just for a second. Julia stepped closer. "You think he didn't talk about you?" she continued, voice shaking now. "You think he didn't tell me how he spent his childhood chasing your approval like it was a moving target?" Agnes snapped back. "He was mine, not yours." "He was never anyone's," Julia said. "And he's gone because we were all too busy trying to own pieces of him." Silence. A breeze stirred trash on the sidewalk. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked once, then stopped. Agnes's hands were fists in her coat pockets. Julia took a deep breath, then reached inside her own coat. "I didn't come out here to fight," she said, pulling out something wrapped in soft old linen. "I came to give you this." Agnes didn't move. Julia unfolded the cloth. Inside was a square of faded fabric, white, fraying with blue embroidery. "Michael, you stitched this," Julia said. "You gave it to him when he was born. He carried it in his wallet his whole life." Agnes stared at it. Her lips parted, but no words came. Julia's voice softened. "He had it in his hand when they found him, folded tight between his fingers. They said he must have pulled it out when the car crashed." Agnes's face didn't move, not even a flinch. Julia stepped forward, extending the cloth to her. "Take it." Agnes looked down, then slowly reached out, only to slap it out of Julia's hand. The cloth fluttered to the pavement like a fallen leaf. Julia gasped. Her shoulders jerked back as if she'd just been slapped herself. Agnes turned on her heel, didn't say a word, didn't look back. She walked down the sidewalk, the street lamplight painting long, cold shadows in front of her. Julia stood there frozen. Then, shaking, she knelt and picked up the cloth, held it in both hands, stared at the name stitched by a younger, softer version of the woman who had just walked away again. The hospital hadn't changed much. Agnes stood outside it now, a tired building of glass and steel in the inner Richmond just west of the park. It looked like every other urban hospital, clean enough to convince you they cared, old enough to remind you they didn't. She stepped through the automatic doors and was immediately swallowed by the smell: disinfectant, floor wax, stale coffee. The same breathless hum of machines and low voices. For a second she was 30 again, back in a white coat, walking these same halls with a clipboard in hand and a diagnosis in her throat. But this time she wasn't a doctor. She was a ghost. The receptionist didn't recognize her. Agnes didn't offer a name. "I'm looking for archival records," she said. "Old ER logs, January 2013. The receptionist hesitated. For a patient, a staff member, Agnes replied. Michael Mitchell. He died here. The woman scanned her face, maybe trying to read if this was grief obsession or both. I'll see what I can find, she said. Take a seat. Agnes didn't. She waited at the counter, still as stone. It took 15 minutes. Eventually, a young man in blue scrubs walked her to the back into a dim archive room where everything smelled like cardboard and forgotten emergencies. Old logs or paper, he said. HIPAA laws limit access, but he was your son. Agnes didn't answer. She just nodded once. He handed her a file folder. She opened it slowly, as if afraid something inside might scream. Michael D. Mitchell, M.D. Emergency Medicine General Surgery Rotation. Last shift, January 12, 2013. Hours worked 36, consecutive, no relief coverage noted. Agnes's heart slowed. 36 hours. She flipped to the next page. Incident report. Vehicle collision, off duty, 5:12 a.m. Sunday morning, westbound on Fell Street. Eyes blurry, late turn, hit a concrete divider, no passengers, no alcohol, no drugs, just fatigue. She blinked. The air in the archive room went thinner. She turned the page again. Nurse's notes. His vitals on arrival. Blood pressure unstable. Internal bleeding. Code blue 3 minutes later. They tried to resuscitate. They did everything right. And still he died on the table. She pressed her hand to the page. The paper was warm from her skin, but it felt like ice. She turned to the final page. Post-incident review. One line caught her eye. Staff noted previous discussion with Dr. Mitchell regarding unsafe shift schedules. He declined escalation to administration. She stared at that line for a long time. He hadn't told them to stop, because he didn't know how, because he was her son. She remembered telling him once as a boy, "There's no such thing as tired when someone needs saving." She had said it in the kitchen while boiling water for tea. He had nodded. He was 8. Agnes stood in the archive room far too long. The young man returned and asked if she needed anything else. No, she said quietly. She tucked the file under her arm and walked out. The hospital's chapel was tucked between radiology and pediatrics. The kind of architectural afterthought that only became sacred when people were desperate enough to believe it. Agnes stepped inside. No one was there. She sat in the second row center aisle. The wooden bench creaked under her. In front of her, a modest wooden cross hung on the wall. A single fake candle flickered on a side table. Everything else was shadow and quiet. She held the file in her lap. It was open, but she wasn't reading it anymore. She knew it now, knew every number, every timestamp, every abbreviation for things too awful to say aloud. Her mouth moved before her brain did. I thought it was her. Her voice sounded strange, raw. I thought she ran him into the ground, that she needed too much, that the kid took too much from him. Her hands clenched the folder tighter. But it wasn't that, was it? The cross didn't answer. Her voice cracked. He never told me how bad it got. He never asked for help. He never said he needed rest. You know why? She didn't wait. Because I taught him not to. Her breath hitched. I told him tired is for cowards, that doctors don't get to complain, that the only way to matter is to give more than you have. She looked down at her lap. Her next words were barely audible, and he listened. A long silence followed. Then she lifted her head. Do you know what the worst part is? She said louder now. I was proud of him for dying like that, for pushing himself to the edge, for being what I made him. Her hands shook. I thought I lost him to her. She blinked hard, but I lost him to me. She covered her mouth with one hand. Her shoulders rose, dropped. No tears, but she was unraveling thread by thread. He was trying to live the way I taught him, she whispered, and it killed him. She stared at the cross, not in prayer, in accusation. Then finally, it wasn't her. The words landed like stones in her chest. It wasn't the hours, or the job, or the marriage. Her lips trembled. It was us. She lowered her head again. All this time I wanted someone to blame. I needed her to be the villain. I needed to hate the life he chose because I couldn't stand the idea that the life I gave him wasn't enough. The folder slipped from her lap, fell to the floor. Pages scattered across the carpet. She didn't move to gather them. She just sat, head bowed, breathing shallow. The door creaked open behind her, someone else entering. She didn't look. She didn't need to. This was her penance. And for now it was enough to sit in the quiet with a dead man's file and admit that she had trained her son to die with grace before ever learning to rest. The envelope was plain. No name, no return address. just a manila square with a slight bend in the middle, slipped under the clinic's front door sometime between the late shift and dawn. No one saw who left it. No one ever would. Julia found it that morning. She picked it up off the floor, still bleary from too little sleep and too many rosters to revise. She figured it was some overdue invoice or donation form. She didn't expect the weight of it solid heavy. She didn't expect the sound, either the subtle thump when she shook it. She took it into her office and shut the door behind her. Inside a check, $100,000, made out to the Michael and Community Health Fund. Her hands trembled. There was a note, too. Just one sentence, handwritten black ink on thick fibrous paper. I'm still alive, and I'm learning how to forgive. Julia sat down, read it again, then again. Her eyes traced the letters. Not the words the way they were written. The curve of the M, the slight break in the G, the sharp slant in the tail of the F. It hit her like a breath she hadn't meant to take. Agnes. She didn't need to sign it. Julia leaned back in her chair, the note still in her hands, the check lying flat on the desk like something sacred. She felt her throat tighten, not from emotion exactly, but from the shock of something long shut suddenly cracking open. She didn't cry, but her fingers wouldn't stop trembling. She folded the note once, then again, tucked it into her drawer beneath a photo of Michael holding baby Noah on the clinic steps. They looked so young in that picture, so whole. When she opened her office door again, Noah was standing outside. He looked up from the clipboard he was checking. "What's that?" he asked, nodding at the envelope in her hand. She smiled softly. "A donation." His eyebrows raised. "From who?" Julia hesitated. She passed him the check. Noah turned it over in his hands, looked at the name on the fund, then back up at her. "You know who sent it?" Julia tilted her head somewhere between a nod and a shrug. "I have a feeling." Noah smiled, but not in surprise, not really. Just a quiet, knowing smile. He handed it back. "I think I do too." Then he walked off toward the medication counter. Julia watched him go, something swelling behind her eyes that she didn't let fall. Across the street behind a tree so wide it split the sidewalk, Agnes stood with one hand pressed against her coat. She'd been watching. Not just today, not just this week. But now it felt different. She hadn't planned to drop the envelope herself. She'd told herself she would mail it, have it couriered, some clean, safe distance. But this morning her hands disobeyed her logic. They dressed her, opened the lockbox, took out the check she'd signed weeks ago and carried it all the way here before she could stop herself. And then she left it. Simple as that. No doorbell, no message, no goodbye. Just I'm still alive and I'm learning how to forgive. It wasn't for Julia, not really. It wasn't even for Noah. It was for the version of herself that still stood in that clinic years ago, believing she could heal anyone but herself. She leaned back against the tree and closed her eyes. She didn't need to be seen. Not now. From across the street she heard Noah's voice clear and light, talking to someone in line. She opened her eyes. He was outside again, handing a paper bag of medications to an older man in a weathered coat. The man took it with both hands and smiled. "I remember when your grandma used to run this place," he said. "She had this stare cut right through the bullshit but never made you feel small." Noah laughed. "Sounds about right." "She's still around." Noah paused. Then with a little tilt of the head and a look toward nothing in particular, he said, "I think so." The old man nodded. "Tell her thanks if you ever see her." Noah gave him a 2-finger salute and turned back toward the clinic. Agnes's hand moved from her chest to her mouth. She didn't cry, but something inside her shifted just enough to let the wind through. She turned, walked back down the street. Her cane tapped softly on the sidewalk. No one followed. She didn't blend into the crowd because there wasn't one, not really. Just a few people out for early errands. But no one looked twice at her, and for the first time in years she didn't mind being invisible. She had been a name on a wall, a plaque on a door, a ghost in her grandson's DNA. She had tried to bury her love with her guilt, and it hadn't worked. But now she was something else. Not a doctor, not a villain, not a martyr. Just a woman walking away after doing the right thing too late, but still doing it. And for now, that was enough. The clinic was quiet. It was after hours, but not completely closed. The last few volunteers had just clocked out, the fluorescent hallway lights dimmed to their night setting, a faint hum from the backroom fridge rising louder than any voices. Noah stood in the supply room organizing blister packs into a plastic drawer labeled seniors, non-opioids. He was humming something barely when his hand knocked against a box wedged behind the pen organizer. He pulled it out. A small wooden case. Cedar, a little dusty. It wasn't clinic issued. It felt older. He opened the lid. Inside, a silver voice recorder. Scuffed, thumb-sized. The kind nobody used anymore. He turned it over in his hand, looking for a date, a label, anything. There was none. But something about the weight of it, the way it fit in his palm, told him it wasn't just junk. He pressed play. Static. A moment of nothing. Then a voice. Soft, weathered, but deliberate. "You don't need to know who I am." Noah froze. The voice crackled. "You don't need to know if I'm close or far, or whether I'm ever coming back. That part doesn't matter." He blinked. His fingers hovered over the pause button but didn't press it. "All you need to know is this: once I had everything, and I lost it. Because I couldn't forgive. Because I needed someone to blame more than I needed someone to love." Noah's throat tightened. He looked around, suddenly aware of how alone he was. The voice continued, steady but broken in places. "I thought I could live without family. I thought being right mattered more than being together. I was wrong." Noah sat down slowly on the small stool in the corner. "And now I watch you." His breath caught. "From across streets. From behind windows. Not because I'm afraid, but because I don't know if I deserve to stand beside you." He looked down at the recorder, at the dull silver edge scratched from years of use. "But I see you. I see the way you listen when others don't. I see how your hands stay steady, even when your voice shakes. I see the part of him that still lives in you." A pause. "And I know now that healing doesn't happen in hospitals, or homes, or history books. It happens in moments like this, in silence, in shadows, when no one's performing." Another breath, this one long. "You're already better than we were. You're already more forgiving than I ever learned to be. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's how the damage stops, not by undoing it, but by ending it with you." There was one more click, then silence. The tape had ended. Noah sat still. His chest ached in a way he didn't understand. He'd never heard that voice before, not in real life. But somehow it felt like a part of him already knew it, recognized the weight behind every syllable. He closed his eyes and just breathed. Behind him at the edge of the hallway, Julia stood. She had arrived halfway through, hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but she heard the voice, and something in her knees locked up. She didn't interrupt. She just stood motionless, her hand on the door frame, her eyes wide with something that wasn't quite sorrow and wasn't quite rage. When the recording stopped, she finally stepped in. Noah turned. His eyes were glassy but not leaking. He held up the recorder like it was some ancient relic. "Did you know about this?" Julia shook her head slowly. "No," she whispered, but her voice broke. Tears filled her eyes before she could stop them, and this time she didn't wipe them away. She walked to the stool and knelt beside him. He handed her the recorder. She took it, pressed it to her chest, closed her eyes, and let herself cry. Later that night, across the city, Agnes sat at her kitchen table. The window was cracked open. Wind moved through the green curtains like a sigh. In front of her, a single sheet of cream-colored paper half filled with ink. Her handwriting was neat, slower than it once was, but steady. "Michael, I never thought I'd write you again, but I saw Noah today, really saw him, and it felt like standing in front of you all over again. His eyes are yours, but his mercy, that's his own. I know now that what we called love was sometimes just fear, that I taught you to overfunction, to outperform, to over-sacrifice, because I thought perfection was how we survived. I was wrong. You died trying to live up to a life I built out of pressure and expectations. You gave yourself away until there was nothing left. And I never stopped you. I called it discipline. I called it duty. But it was control. And I'm sorry. If this letter ever reaches your son, I hope it tells him what I never had the courage to say to you out loud, that I was proud of you. Not for your hours, not for your grades, not for the letters after your name. I was proud of your compassion, of the way you loved others when I forgot how. And I'm proud of him, of Noah, for being the one to break the cycle, for finding gentleness where we only knew grit. I may never get the chance to say this out loud, but this is my truest voice. I loved you, I still do. And I'm trying, I really am. Mom. She finished the signature, folded the letter carefully, got up, walked across the room to her dresser, where a framed photo of Michael stood him in his 20s, wind in his hair, laughing at someone off camera. Agnes slipped the letter behind the photograph, then picked up the frame. She held it to her chest, her eyes closed, and in the silence that followed there was no sound. But there was something else, a kind of stillness, a kind of beginning. The next morning, Julia found an envelope tucked beneath the bookshelf at the clinic. No one saw who left it, no cameras, no witnesses. Inside, a handwritten letter, folded once, taped to the back of a photo. A young Michael standing outside the very clinic he would one day die working for. The photo had aged, creased, a little water-warped, but it was unmistakably him. She pulled the note from the back, read it once, twice. By the third time, her hands were shaking. She looked around the office empty at this hour, then pressed the letter to her heart and whispered, "I forgive you." Whether it was for Agnes or Michael or herself, it didn't matter. The echo reached all of them. The sidewalk shifted beneath her. It wasn't a stumble, not at first. Just a tilt like the concrete had nudged her gently to remind her she was mortal. Agnes paused, one hand on the wrought iron gate outside her building. The green paint was peeling, the same gate Michael used to rattle when he came home late from high school testing if she'd fallen asleep. She hadn't, not once. She exhaled slowly, waiting for the vertigo to pass. But it didn't. Instead, her legs gave out. No warning, no ceremony. Her knees buckled and she hit the ground hard, hip first, then shoulder, then her head gently tapped the step like a final punctuation mark. Her cane clattered away. Her purse rolled into the street. The last thing she saw before her vision tunneled was the sky, an overcast gray, the color of silence. And then darkness. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" A voice. Male, young, close, hands under her back. She was lifted slowly into something padded. She opened her mouth, but nothing came. Just breath. Then lights overhead, moving past her, one by one, fluorescent rectangles. The sound of a gurney wheel squeaking. A siren muffled behind glass. Then nothing again. The nurse found her ID tucked inside her wallet. A cracked, faded card that still read, Dr. Agnes M. Mitchell, psychiatrist, license expired. Below it in small print was a former address, the old clinic, a number scribbled in red ink. The nurse called it. It rang once, twice. Julia answered. "Community Health and Hope Center. This is Julia speaking." "Yes, hi. We have a patient here. Possibly unconscious. ID says Agnes Mitchell. Are you her emergency contact?" There was a pause. Then yes, I am. Julia walked through the hospital doors like a woman walking back into a nightmare she'd already survived once. The smell hit her first antiseptic IV plastic, that weird scent of clean filtered through trauma. Her stomach knotted. Her heels clicked too loud on the tile. Room 204. She stopped at the door. Her hand hovered over the handle. She pushed. Agnes lay on the bed, face pale and slack eyes closed. A heart monitor beeped steadily beside her. Her hair was flattened on one side. An oxygen tube rested beneath her nose. She looked impossibly small in the white sheets. The woman who once filled every room with judgment now looked like a question mark curled at the edge of a chapter. Julia stepped in. The door clicked shut behind her. She didn't speak right away, just stood there watching, until Agnes stirred. Her eyes fluttered, opened, cloudy but searching. They met Julia's. Agnes tried to speak. It came out as a croak. Julia rushed to the bedside. Hey, I'm here." Agnes blinked slowly. Her lips barely moved. "You came," she rasped. "Of course I came." A faint smile. Ghostly. "Wasn't sure you would. I didn't think you'd give me another reason." Agnes coughed softly. Her fingers twitched. Julia reached out instinctively and took her hand. The skin was papery cold, but Agnes gripped back, weak but deliberate. There was silence for a long time. Then her voice barely there. "You're still angry?" Julia shook her head, tears stinging her eyes. "No, not anymore." Agnes's eyes closed again. Her body relaxed just a fraction. "He was my boy," she whispered. "I know." Agnes turned her head slightly. The effort looked like it cost her everything. "I thought, if I punished you hard enough, he'd come back. That grief could trade places with guilt." Her breathing hitched. "I told myself you killed him, but really..." Her fingers tightened. "I pushed him so far he never learned to rest." Julia's tears broke. "I know," she said. Agnes turned to her again, and her next words came out broken like the sound itself had splintered. "Forgiveness. It's the only thing I have left to give him. Julia pressed her forehead to their joined hands, her body shaking with quiet sobs. Agnes stroked her thumb across Julia's knuckles, as if comforting a child. They stayed like that. No beeping changed, no machines roared, no doctors rushed in. Just the old woman and the woman she once couldn't bear finally breathing the same moment without walls. And in the stillness between one monitor pulse and the next, they began again. 1 year later, the scaffolding was gone. So were the peeling posters, the busted lock on the side door, and the tired flickering fluorescent lights. In their place, fresh green paint, clean glass, a new awning that stretched across the front entrance flanked by blooming jasmine, and a pair of wooden benches carved by hand, donated by a local carpenter who used to sleep on the sidewalk here. Above the door, the new sign gleamed in brushed bronze, Michael and Agnes Healing Center. Julia stood just beneath it, adjusting the cuff of her blazer. She wasn't used to dressing up anymore, not since the last fundraiser 6 months back. But today felt different. It was more than a ceremony. It was a resurrection. She glanced at the photo already mounted on the newly painted lobby wall. A frame side by side Michael in his ER scrub stethoscope around his neck, smile crooked. And Agnes Stern in her white coat eyes, sharp but warm, seated at her old desk, the one they'd found in storage and restored for this very wall. 2 portraits, 2 legacies, 1 story. People began arriving, former patients, volunteers, local city reps, even a few reporters from small community outlets who'd heard about the anonymous donation, the revival of the clinic, the second chance it symbolized. Julia shook hands, hugged old friends, pointed people toward the coffee cart they'd rented for the morning. But her eyes kept searching for someone who hadn't RSVP'd. In the back room, Noah adjusted his tie for the 3rd time in the bathroom mirror. It didn't sit right on his neck, not because of the knot, but because of what it represented. Standing in front of people, speaking, owning something bigger than himself. He wasn't afraid. He just wanted to get it right. He looked down at the index card in his hand. His speech, scribbled in blue pen, barely legible. He closed his eyes, took a breath, then walked out. Julia tapped the microphone. The crowd settled. "Thank you all for being here today," she began. When this building first opened nearly 20 years ago, it was under a different name. It was a private clinic run by a woman who believed sometimes too fiercely that people deserved to be heard. She passed that belief to her son, and through him to her grandson. A pause, a breath. Today we honor both those stories, the messy, complicated, beautiful truth of them. She turned slightly, and now someone who represents the future of this place. Someone who, without even knowing, reminded us why we're here in the first place. She stepped aside. "Please welcome Noah Mitchell." Applause. Noah walked up slowly, suit jacket tight at the shoulders, tie still crooked. But his spine was straight. He looked out over the crowd, saw a sea of eyes, some smiling, some already misty. He cleared his throat. "I was only 3 when my dad died," he began. "And for a long time I didn't really know what that meant. Not just that he was gone, but what it meant to be left behind." The silence grew thick, respectful. As I got older, I heard a lot of stories. Some said he was brilliant. Others said he worked too hard. Some said he was running away from things. Some said he was running towards something bigger. He looked down at the card, then set it aside. "I don't know which story is true. Maybe all of them are." A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "But what I do know is this love doesn't die. It just steps back, waits, until someone's ready to let it in again." A murmur of emotion ran through the crowd. "I've learned," he continued, voice steadier now, "that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering differently. It means seeing pain not as a prison, but as a bridge." He looked at the portraits behind him. "My grandmother didn't always get it right. Neither did my dad. But they gave me something better than answers." He looked back at the crowd. "They gave me the chance to choose differently, to love better, to listen harder." A long pause. "And for that, I'll be forever grateful." The applause came slow at first, then stronger. Not polite, real. Julia stood to the side, clapping quietly, her eyes brimming with pride and grief, and something else, something finally at peace. From across the street, half-shadowed behind a row of trees, Agnes watched. She wasn't in a wheelchair anymore. Her body was slower, her gait more cautious, but she could walk short distances on good days. Today was a good day. She leaned on her cane, watched the building, the people, the boy. She couldn't hear the speech, but she saw his face, saw the way his hands moved when he talked, saw Michael in the lines of his jaw, the way he tilted his head just before he smiled. She stood still as a gravestone, her heartbeat steady. She didn't want to be inside, didn't need to be. This moment wasn't for her ego, it was for his healing. And she had learned finally that presence didn't need proximity. A woman passed by her on the sidewalk, slowed down, looked at her. "You here for the ceremony?" she asked kindly. Agnes smiled faintly, in a way. The woman nodded and kept walking. Back at the podium, Noah glanced to his left. Something pulled at him. Not a sound, not a person, just a feeling. He turned his head slightly toward the window. The sunlight had shifted, and there, just past the crowd across the street between branches and wind, he saw her. An old woman in a charcoal coat, standing alone. She didn't wave, but she stood tall. Noah's eyes softened. His chest lifted, and in the next breath, just before the crowd erupted into a standing ovation, he whispered to himself like a prayer, "I see you." The celebration was still going. People clapped. Someone was laughing near the refreshment table. Kids ran between rows of folding chairs, their sneakers thudding on the cement. The ribbon from the grand opening lay curled on the pavement, red and spent. But at the edge of it all, where the shadows lingered longer and the light hit softer, a figure sat still. Agnes, wrapped in a wool coat despite the mild air, a green scarf tucked around her throat. Her wheelchair angled just so behind the magnolia tree, far enough to be unseen, close enough to see everything. She watched as Noah shook hands with donors, posed for pictures, leaned down to speak with a little girl who offered him a paper flower. She watched Julia hug a nurse, watched old patients take photos in front of the sign with her and Michael's names etched side by side. She didn't smile yet, not because she wasn't proud, but because pride still felt foreign, like wearing someone else's shoes. She sat quietly, breathing in the moment. Then something shifted. Noah, mid-conversation, turned, not toward her, not directly, but his body hesitated. His eyes swept the edge of the lot, the sidewalk, the trees, and for the briefest second he looked right at her, or maybe just through her. He didn't react, didn't point. He just nodded, subtle, like the kind of nod you give a stranger who's offered you something that matters. Not a greeting, a recognition. Agnes's breath caught. Her hand twitched slightly on the armrest. She nodded back, and then for the first time in 10 years she smiled. It wasn't wide, it didn't stretch with joy, it didn't carry the weight of triumph. It was quiet, tired, true. The kind of smile that said I was wrong, but I made it here anyway. That evening the crowd thinned. Julia wheeled Agnes down the back alley to avoid the commotion. Neither said much, but it wasn't an awkward silence. It was the kind of silence that knew how to carry two people gently. When they reached the old gate, Julia parked the chair and crouched beside her. "You want me to walk you up?" Agnes shook her head. "No, I'll rest here a minute." Julia hesitated, then placed something on Agnes's lap, a small leather-bound notebook. Agnes raised an eyebrow. "I found it," Julia said, "in the storage closet behind the clinic's old file cabinet. It's yours, isn't it?" Agnes touched the cover, ran her fingers over the worn spine. "Yes," Julia nodded. "You left a lot behind." "I had to," Agnes replied, voice low. Back then it all hurt too much to carry. Julia stood uncertain. Agnes looked up at her. "Thank you for keeping it alive, for not letting the clinic die with him." Julia's voice caught. "It didn't die with him. It just took a while to find its pulse again." They looked at each other. No more apologies. No need. Julia gently placed her hand over Agnes's and walked away without another word. Inside her apartment, Agnes sat at the writing desk facing the window. The room was dim lit only by the golden glow of sunset slipping through the blinds. The walls still the same pale green. The silence familiar, but not heavy. She opened the notebook. Blank pages, except for the first where her own handwriting waited like a question answered years late. She picked up her pen. Her hand trembled, but the ink flowed steady. Forgiveness doesn't change the past. It doesn't rewrite what was broken. It doesn't undo the things we said, or the things we never dared to say. But it does change something else, the shape of the road we walk after. I used to think forgiveness was a prize people had to earn, a transaction, a trade. Now I know it's something you give because you can't carry the weight anymore. and because sometimes giving it away is the only way you survive. Michael, if you're somewhere, if any part of you still watches him, watches us, I want you to know. She paused, looked toward the window where the sky had turned a rich amber blue. I forgive myself too. She put down the pen, closed the notebook, and leaned back in her chair. Outside, the city moved on. Cars passed. A siren in the distance. The murmur of a child shouting after a dog. Life indifferent and constant. But in that small room something had shifted. A wound closed. Not sealed, not erased, just quieted. As the last of the light slipped behind the buildings, Agnes sat still, her eyes half-lidded, her chest rising gently. No need to rush. Her wheelchair stood nearby waiting. The framed photo of Michael sat on the shelf this time, not turned face down. And the last shot, a wide frame, the room green-tinted in the dusk. Agnes at peace in her chair staring toward the window. The voice over hers soft and almost a whisper. Some stories don't need recognition, just redemption. The screen faded to black, then silence. Only silence.